stop. Before you scroll past this video, I need you to understand one thing. Everything you were taught about human history is wrong, not slightly wrong, not a minor error in the textbooks. Catastrophically, fundamentally, deliberately wrong. And I can prove it with 5 places on this planet that have no business existing. 5 locations that the world's most respected scientists cannot explain, and in some cases have quietly stopped trying to. By the end of this video, you won't look at the ground beneath your feet the same way again. Because we are not the first advanced civilization on Earth, we are the survivors of one. Göbekli Tepe, the temple they buried on purpose. In 1994, a German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt was digging in the hills of southern Turkey. The local villagers had a name for the hill he was excavating. They called it the belly button of the world. He thought they were being poetic. They weren't. What Schmidt found underneath that hill didn't just shock the scientific community, it broke it. He uncovered a massive temple complex. Rings of T-shaped stone pillars, some weighing up to 50 tons, each one carved with extraordinary precision. Scorpions, foxes, vultures, lions, symbols so sophisticated they'd look at home in any modern museum. But here's the problem. The carbon dating came back. This temple was built 12,000 years ago. 12,000. Let that number sit in your chest for a moment. That is 7,000 years before the Egyptian pyramids. 6,000 years before Stonehenge. At the very end of the last ice age, when, according to the history you were taught in school, human beings were wandering the wilderness in animal skins, grunting at fires, barely surviving. Those same primitive savages somehow organized thousands of workers, fed them, coordinated them, hauled 50-ton stone blocks across mountainous terrain without wheels, without cranes, without metal tools, and then carved those blocks with such precision that modern engineers look at the work and go quiet. The official explanation? There isn't one. Not really. Scientists use phrases like organized hunter-gatherers and proto-religious communities. But that's not an explanation. That's a label placed over a hole in history to stop people from falling in. To build what they built at Göbekli Tepe, you need surplus food production, meaning agriculture. You need a command structure, meaning government. You need engineering knowledge passed down through generations, meaning writing or oral tradition. You need, by definition, a civilization. But the timeline says civilization didn't exist yet, so either the timeline is wrong or someone is lying. But here is the detail that changes everything. The detail they never put in the headline. Göbekli Tepe was not destroyed. It was not abandoned. It was not conquered. It was buried. 8,000 years ago, someone, or a group of people, spent an enormous, almost incomprehensible amount of effort deliberately filling this entire complex with earth. They sealed it. They hid it. From what? The pillars are covered in carvings of death symbols, vultures carrying human heads, scorpions clustering around entrances, serpents coiled at the base of every column. This was not a place of celebration. This was a place that someone decided the world was better off not knowing about. And whatever they were afraid of, whatever made them bury it, we dug it back up in 1994. Maybe that was a mistake. Mohenjo-Daro, the city that died in 1 second, in the valley of the Indus River, in what is now Pakistan, there are ruins. Not just ruins, a crime scene. The city is called Mohenjo-Daro. The name, translated from ancient Sanskrit, means the Mound of the Dead. When archaeologists uncovered it in 1922, they expected to find the slow decay of a forgotten civilization, crumbled walls, empty houses, the usual artifacts of a city that simply faded away. What they found instead was a city frozen in its final moment. 4,500 years ago, Mohenjo-Daro was one of the most advanced cities on Earth. Sophisticated sewage systems, more complex than 19th century European cities. 2-story brick homes with indoor bathrooms. Wide, perfectly grid-aligned streets. A population estimated at 40,000 people. And then, in a single instant, it died. The skeletons were the first horror. 44 sets of human remains found exactly where the people fell. On streets, in doorways, inside homes. One family, a mother, a father, and a child, hands intertwined, collapsed together in the middle of a road. No one buried them. No one came back. The bodies lay there for thousands of years, untouched. In a hot climate where organic material should have decomposed and been scattered by scavengers within months, these skeletons were perfectly preserved. No animal tooth marks, no scattering, no decomposition consistent with the environment. Scientists were baffled. Then they tested the bones. The radiation levels were 50 times above normal background levels. Some samples matched the radiation signatures found in victims of the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Read that sentence again. Then look at the second piece of evidence, the black stones. Across the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro, archaeologists recovered thousands of fragments of clay pottery and brick that had fused together, melted into a black glass-like material called vitrified rock. To vitrify stone requires temperatures above 1,500 degrees Celsius. A standard fire, even a raging inferno, reaches 800 degrees. The only natural forces capable of those temperatures are volcanic eruptions. There are no volcanoes in the Indus Valley. There never have been. The damage pattern of the city follows a specific geometry. Buildings at the center are obliterated. Structures at the outer edges show progressively less damage. This pattern is consistent with exactly one thing, a blast epicenter. Now consider this. The ancient Indian epic, the Mahabharata, written thousands of years ago, describes a weapon used by the gods in their wars. The text says the weapon blazed with the light of 10,000 suns, that rivers boiled, that fish cooked alive in the water, that trees burst into flame, that survivors' hair and nails fell out, that their food became poisoned, that the only way to survive was to enter water, wash yourself, and discard all metal. Those are not metaphors. That is a clinical description of acute radiation poisoning. Someone used a weapon of mass destruction 4,000 years ago in the Indus Valley, and the evidence has been sitting in the open in a museum in Pakistan for over a century. Derinkuyu, the underground city built to hide from the sky. In 1963, a man in Cappadocia, Turkey, noticed his chickens were disappearing, one by one, every few days, into a small crack in the wall of his basement. He assumed there was a hole. He picked up a sledgehammer and knocked the wall down. Behind it was not a hole. Behind it was a tunnel, and the tunnel went down, and down, and down. What he had accidentally uncovered was Derinkuyu, the largest and most sophisticated underground city ever discovered on Earth. Carved from soft volcanic rock, the complex descends at least 85 meters below the surface. That is the equivalent of a 30-story skyscraper, inverted and driven straight into the Earth. Officially, archaeologists have confirmed 8 levels, but ground-penetrating radar suggests the structure goes much, much deeper. Levels sealed by collapsed rock. Chambers that have never been opened. The engineers estimated it could house 20,000 people, along with their livestock, their food stores, their wine, their oil presses, their schools, their chapels. This was not a shelter. This was a civilization that went underground and planned to stay there. The engineering is frankly impossible by the standards we attribute to that era. 15,000 ventilation shafts, precisely angled so that fresh air reaches even the deepest levels. Water wells drilled down to the water table, but engineered so that anyone on the surface could not poison them. Entrances sealed from the inside by massive circular stone doors, each weighing half a ton, that could not be opened from the outside under any circumstances. Narrow corridors deliberately designed so attackers could only enter single file, bent double, with no room to swing a weapon. This city was engineered by people who had thought very carefully about what they were hiding from. Here is what nobody asks out loud, but everyone should. Why underground? If your enemy uses swords and arrows and siege weapons, you build a mounted fortress. You take the high ground. You defend from above. Going underground makes sense for precisely one reason. Your enemy attacks from the sky. And if the sky becomes uninhabitable, if the surface of the earth itself is deadly, then you dig, you go deep, You pull 1,000,000 tons of rock over your head and you pray. Ancient Zoroastrian texts describe a prophecy. A god named Ahura Mazda warns a king that fire will fall from the sky and that a catastrophic winter will follow. He commands the king to build an underground refuge called Avara to preserve humanity. Cross-reference that with Derinkuyu. Cross-reference that with Mohenjo-Daro. 20,000 people, men, women, children, sat in darkness underground, breathing recycled air, while whatever was happening on the surface finished happening. They survived, apparently, but whatever they were hiding from terrified them so completely that they carved an entire city out of solid rock rather than risk a single minute under open sky. Look up at the sky right now. What would make you afraid of it? Yonaguni Monument. The sunken city. That shouldn't exist. In 1986, a diver named Kihachiro Aratake slipped beneath the surface of the Pacific Ocean near a tiny Japanese island called Yonaguni. He was looking for hammerhead sharks. He found something else. At 25 meters below the surface, rising from the blue-black deep like a sleeping god, was a structure. Massive flat terraces, perfect right angles, geometric platforms stacked in precise layers, stone steps, carved steps ascending to a flat summit. Aratake surfaced. He looked around. He had no words. He named it Iseki. In Japanese, it means simply ruins. The Yonaguni monument measures 150 meters long, 40 meters wide, and 27 meters tall. It is the size of a 10-story building, carved entirely from sandstone bedrock. When the scientific community found out, the debate was immediate and vicious. Skeptical geologists said sandstone naturally fractures in straight lines. It was all coincidence. The ocean floor can look man-made without being man-made. So Professor Masaaki Kimura of the University of the Ryukyus spent 15 years and hundreds of dives building the definitive counter-argument. He found 2 perfect circular holes drilled into the upper terrace, the right diameter and spacing for support columns. He found a triangular pool, geometrically exact. He found a drainage trench that ran ruler straight across the face of the structure. He found a 15-meter stone arch, a gateway, built from precisely fitted blocks with no mortar. Nature does not build archways. Nature does not drill column holes. Nature does not make drainage ditches. Then Kimura found the face. A massive boulder near the base of the monument, carved with unmistakable eyes, a nose, a mouth. It lies on its back, staring upward at a surface it will never see again. Divers describe it as one of the most unsettling things they have ever encountered underwater, the sense that something is looking back at them. But the detail that should keep you awake at night is the timeline. Yonaguni and the surrounding region sank beneath the ocean at the end of the last ice age, approximately 10,000 years ago. 10,000 years ago. Official history says human beings in Japan at that time lived in earthen pits. No metal tools, no mathematics, no writing, no architecture. And yet here is a structure that required precision, stone cutting at industrial scale, using geometry, planning, and engineering knowledge so advanced that it appears to require hundreds of years of accumulated expertise to produce. A civilization capable of building Yonaguni would have needed to exist for a very long time before building it, which means civilization is at least 15,000 to 20,000 years old, which means we have been living inside a story that is missing thousands of years of its beginning. Ancient Pacific legends speak of a lost continent called Mu, a vast empire swallowed by the ocean in a single catastrophic day when the earth shook and the sea rose without warning. The people of Yonaguni would have had no warning. They were there, living on those terraces, walking those steps, praying by that triangular pool. And then the ocean came, and now divers swim through their streets, and something at the bottom stares upward, waiting. Plain of jars the valley of the dead. And why any of this matters in the mountains of Laos, there is a place that feels like the aftermath of a dream, a vast empty plateau ringed by mist-covered peaks, and scattered across it, randomly, chaotically, as if dropped from some impossible height. Thousands of enormous stone jars. The smallest ones are 1/2 meter tall and weigh 500 kilograms. The largest, which locals call the King's Cup, stands 3 meters high and weighs 6 tons. There are thousands of them, across more than 90 separate sites, made from granite, sandstone, limestone, and conglomerate, stone types whose nearest sources are dozens of kilometers away through some of the most impenetrable jungle on the planet. No roads, no wheels, no machines. And yet someone moved 6-ton stone jars through mountains. The French archaeologist Madeleine Colani first documented the site in the 1930s. She noticed the jars had lids, massive stone discs, perfectly fitted. Whatever was stored inside was meant to be sealed. Then she found the cave, a natural cavern nearby, its ceiling blackened with centuries of soot and ash, a cremation chamber. She realized the truth. These jars were not storage vessels. They were incubators for the dead. Bodies were placed inside them whole. The lids were sealed. The tropical heat did the rest, an accelerated decomposition, a fermentation of flesh, until only clean bones remained. The bones were then removed, burned in the cave, and the ashes buried beside the jars. This was an industrial death processing operation at a scale that required enormous resources, enormous coordination, and an enormous belief system to justify. The living built these for the dead, for thousands of them. But look at the plain of jars from above, from satellite imagery, and something stranger emerges. The groupings of jars don't appear random. They form patterns, clusters that mirror specific star constellations as they appeared in the night sky 2,000 years ago. These weren't just graves. They were a map of heaven, built on earth, populated with the dead, pointing the souls of the departed back home to the stars. 5 places. Göbekli Tepe, buried in fear by the people who built it. Mohenjo-Daro, vaporized by something that left radiation in the bones. Derinkuyu, carved by people so terrified of the sky they went 85 meters underground. Yonaguni, a sunken city staring upward from the ocean floor. The Plain of Jars, a graveyard mapped to the stars. 5 different continents, 5 different time periods. One repeating story. Civilization rose. Civilization peaked. Civilization ended. And then, with enough time, it rose again with no memory of what came before. We think we are the pinnacle of human achievement. We think history starts with Mesopotamia and peaks with us. We think the past was primitive and the present is the summit. These stones disagree. We are not standing at the top of human history. We might be at the bottom. There was something before us, something enormous, something we barely left a trace of, except for the stones, because only stone survives long enough to tell the truth. And the stone is telling us, you have done this before. The question is whether we are paying attention this time.